Ungrim Ironfist, king of Karak Kadrin and slayer wreathed in shame, his oath to his homeland, duty to his people, and desire to atone for his disgrace by dying gloriously make him a figure in constant conflict with himself, and usually a few people nearby. The official version of events has him spending many years quite grumpy, outliving his only son, losing his ancient hold, all quite sad, and then, he exploded himself. What a way to go! Today I want to give Ungrim an alternate history. He won't wait for the apocalypse, but meet it head on. There will be a deluge of blood, grudges penned and grudges settled, great battles and greater dooms, in the Slayer King's quest to resolve the war raging within him, as well as all the others he starts along the way. This is my narrative campaign for Ungrim Ironfist, the last king of Karak Kadrin. It is a slayer's lot to seek their doom. The more glorious, violent, and earth-shaking, the better. The greater the dwarf's burden of shame, the more spectacular his death must be. There was no end of things to kill near the mountain hold of Karak Kadrin, though dying at the hands of the local Groby was not the sort of fate to scrub generations of shame from Ungrim Ironfist's family conscience. His throng marched the ancient mountain passages, driving goblins from usurped holds. Not doom-seeking, merely housekeeping. The World's Edge Mountains were once the resolute backbone of the Karaz Ankor, the everlasting realm of the Dwarfs. The name did not translate well into Goblin, and they drove out the Dwarfs and squatted within their ruined cities. The throng moved through the mountains, striking out with a speed far too fast for a dwarf. As word of the Great Purge echoed, more slayers flocked to them. Some sought to start their own legends, others were already a few chapters in, like Dragon Slayer Crag Redax. Ungrim's existence was a state of conflict. His slayer oath demanded death to purify his family's shame, but his duty as the king of Karak Kadrin required he place his people's needs above his own. An oath mandates everything to a dwarf, and two oaths that constantly undermine and counteract each other, well, that's the reason for Ungrim's legendary short temper and general grumpiness. Impulsiveness ran in the family, and Ungrim's son Garagrim had shirked his duties as heir to Karak Kadrin, grabbed his axes, and joined the throng in its purging of the mountainside. While Ungrim did not support his son taking the Slayer Oath nor Garagrim declaring himself War Mourner of Karak Kadrin, he couldn't deny that the boy sure could swing an axe. Or two. The force marched on the Red Eye tribe, local Groby who'd been doing terrible things to the good honourable Dwarfen stone for decades. The goblins, being goblins, were incredibly dim, and luring them into a trap was as easy as beating an elf in a drinking contest. The tribe was shattered, and any remaining goblins were thrown down the mountain for sport, but this was not the time for complacency nor celebration. Karaz Ankor, former heart of the Dwarfen Empire, was buckling beneath Skarsnik's hordes. Thorgrim's grudge-bearer needed aid, and Ungrim Ironfist would answer. So the Slayers cut down their after-battle beer-guzzling to a mere 6 hours and marched on. They surrounded the fallen hold of Mount Gunbad. The throng's engineers estimated a few days to build the proper siege engines required for such an assault. Uncharacteristically impatient for a dwarf, Ungrim declared himself a siege engine and ran towards the city much to the bewilderment of the engineers and the defending goblins. The Slayers surged towards the walls at speeds that defied dwarfen physics. They hollered challenges and oaths as they neared, barreling up the ladders to meet the Groby in glorious combat. Where does a slayer dressed only in threadbare trousers keep a 30-foot ladder? That is a good question, but there isn't time now for its answer. After liberating the hold, Ungrim's march was halted by some cataclysmic news. Thorgrim couldn't hold out. Karaz Ankor had fallen. Ungrim spat an oath and mentally penned Skarsnik into the Damaz Kron, but the goblin wasn't the only one added to the Great Book of Grudges that day. Gorebad, brutal warboss of the Ironclaw Orcs, declared his intent with a single word. Violent days were coming, and that put Ungrim and the Drengi, his slayer retinue, in a damn good mood. The war horns of the Greenskin War and its accompanying earth-shaking march could be felt for miles, though the horde had gotten themselves mixed up in their directions and ended up underground, Clearly, they had some sort of plan, but it was probably quite a stupid one. Ungrim fell on the orcs in the ancient ruined halls of his ancestors. An age of reckoning had ended. Next came the age of reckoning, one with far more reckoning than ever before. The Grobi were driven out of the mountain holds on the throng's warpath to Karaz Ankor. Their flame cannons belched fire upon the walls, reducing them to rubble. Dowie craftsmanship would never fall so easily, and the engineers concluded that the goblins must have sabotaged their own walls to make the dwarfs look bad. A mass of orange crests and whirling axes poured through the breach and into the defending greenskins. They cleared the courtyard and wrested control of the gatehouse, and the rumbling groan of the opening gates portended the dwarfs' utter triumph. Karaz Ankor was retaken. Thorgrim was avenged, and a mighty grudge had been settled. So absolutely was this grudge vindicated that it brought Thorgrim back to life in a bizarre twist of fate that's better left unscrutinized. A great blow had been dealt to the greenskins, and they would hit back in anger. Both Skarsnik and Gorebad lashed out and brought destruction to the dwarfen lands. It would be standard dwarf thinking to seal the holds at this point. Let the sea of orcs crash upon their mighty walls and outweather the storm. There's a reason slayers don't tend to work so well in civilized dwarfen society. Much to the dismay of all those without a death wish, Ungrim met the greenskins head-on, driving them back in an act of brutal defiance. The Slayers' wishes for greater and more deadly confrontations were answered. The roar of battle rang up and down the World's Edge mountains as Urki savageness met Drengi fury. Heaving masses of Grobi were slaughtered in one valley, while Slayers fought to the bitter end in another. The losses were more celebrated than the victories, for who would not want to meet their doom, crushed by a 10-ton spider? Well, most people with a brain wouldn't want that. But these are Slayers, and most of them probably have brain damage. Thorgrim had been charged with restoring the influence of Karaz Ankor, leading his own throng to face another of Gorebad's incursions. The Ironclaw tribe were the true threat, but Skarsnik was as incessant as a rabid dog nipping at Ungrim's heels. The Slayer tracked him down, and there were to be no tricks nor reckless gambits. He knew Skarsnik would not be his undoing. I mean, come on, look at him, he's rubbish. No further time would be wasted on this Wazok, and the Slayers crashed upon them in an avalanche of glittering steel and sinuous muscle. Slayers became forces of nature, reckless dervishes of hammer and axe. Ungrim found Skarsnik amidst the din. He beat him relentlessly until he ran away, and then he beat him some more. There is an unspoken respect between a Slayer and his would-be killer, but Ungrim had no respect for Skarsnik, as he could never kill him. He was a pest, and nothing more. The throng marched forth, bringing down the Ironclaw war camps. They swept through each with a cruel meticulousness to ensure that none survived. The World's Edge mountains were forged in blood, and they were being tempered once more. News of the heroism and audacity of Ungrim's struggles echoed across cities of man and dwarf alike. Heroes flocked from far and wide, eager for a mention in his saga. Troll slayers, dragon slayers, demon slayers, even realm slayers. Gotrek Gurnason, slayer of great renown and even greater infamy, wanted in, and he brought his manling remembrancer along to record the adventure or die trying. Despite decades of bad blood between Gotrek and Ungrim, the king reluctantly agreed, for wherever Gotrek goes, destinies unfold. Maybe they'd patch things up, forgive their grudges as they fought and died together. Then again, they are dwarfs, so they'd probably end up stubbornly hating each other until the end of days. As if drawn towards the epicenter of a fateful day, Gorebad Ironclaw rode out to challenge the dwarfs, and Ungrim ushered his throng towards their deaths. The Slayers hurtled forth, bellowing oaths, eager for the bloodshed promised them. I'd like to say that Gorebad proved a worthy challenger. I'd like to say he didn't run away, and that the king of Karak Kadrin did not have to chase after him indignantly. To preserve dignity, the gyrocopters were ordered to rain hell down upon him. And I'd like to say that Gorebad was swallowed up in a fantastic fireball that would act as a memorable final scene to this bloody campaign. But he wasn't. He ran away and died off screen somewhere in a manner that is far from befitting an orc of his stature. It was pathetic. Ungrim wanted more. He wanted a challenge. He wanted a true test to mark his name in the annals of history. And that wish was soon answered. The World's Edge Mountains held a nervous sense of calm following Gorebad Ironclaw's defeat. A peace shattered when the deepest, darkest passages beneath spat forth the dwarfs' most ancient and devious foe. No, not the elves, but something nearly as terrible, the Thagoraki, the Skaven. From the bowels of the Darklands came Clan Rictus, who swarmed over the World's Edge archway, reducing it to rubble. Havoc cries out and answers its own echoing call. As the dwarfs rushed to face this menace, Clan Moors launched a surprise coordinated attack. Their leader Queek Headtaker adorned himself in these severed appendages of great dwarfs, and he had made room for Ungrim in his collection. The Slayer King marched to meet the gruesome warlord, while a secondary force stemmed the flow of Clan Rictus's warbands. But the Skaven had been watching the dwarfs for weeks, and they knew which roads they travelled and when. They had superiority in numbers and wielded the element of surprise. Victory was certain, the Ratman generals knew. They charged into the unsuspecting dwarf retinue. A frantic surge of steel and screams and slaughter. Howls echoed through the pass, and the haze of blood settled to reveal a massacre. The dwarfs were dead. Dead angry that the Skaven ambush was so pathetic. More, they bellowed, roaring challenges and thrashing their weapons together. The initial assault was decimated instantaneously, but here's rule number 1 of Skaven warfare. If at first you don't succeed, throw 10,000 more bodies at the problem. The Ratmen kept coming, and even Slayers have their limits. As the Raki kept piling into them, the last of the dwarfs collapsed, exhausted, but satisfied. There were no survivors, but the Drengi fulfilled their oaths and dragged thousands of Skaven kicking and screaming with them into the abyss. That's the thing about dwarves. They know everything has a price. Sometimes they pay it in gold, sometimes they pay it in stone, and sometimes they pay it in blood. But they pay that price gladly. The Slayer's violent defiance secured time for a second muster, which repelled Clan Rictus back towards the Darklands. The World's Edge archway was retaken, and the argument to defensively hold the fort was entertained for about 16 seconds. It seems even Thorgrim Grudgebearer was questioning tradition in favor of Ungrim's new age, run up and bash them tactics. The Darklands were a blasphemous place, though they were made marginally better by the fact that the dwarf's infernal kin, the Dawi Jar, appeared to all be dead. Thorgrim enjoyed that realization before feeling a bit sad that he didn't get to kill any Chaos Dwarfs. The Skaven were an insidious menace, and their coming had dredged more vile spawn from forgotten places. A beastman herd sensed the disruption and attacked. The dwarfs did not have an answer until one came to them.
You know who I am?
The White Dwarf dealt with the Badlands, while Ungrim faced the Skaven. A new age of reckoning was dawning, and as the Doomseekers lined up to meet Clan Moors, they felt in their bones that this was to be a monumental day. Ungrim Ironfist knew what he was marching into. His modest throng was looking at a force nearly 8,000 strong. He was outnumbered 10-1 at least, and the Skaven brought every unholy advantage from their under-empire. War machines, mutants, storm vermin, gunners. The Slayer King had no hope of survival, and he liked those odds. They say when the dwarfs were forged, fear was not part of that process. The Slayer King and his retinue proved that true. They surged into the Skaven, Ungrim, Garagrim, Crag, Gotrek. The Slayers of Legend waded deep into enemy ranks to find their prophesized dooms. Red ruins surrounded each, as they became solitary whirlpools in a churning sea of bristling fur and gnashing teeth. Ungrim would die this day, but he'd do so, honoring his oath and settling ancient grudges. He spotted Queek Headtaker in the fray, and hewed a path towards him, bellowing a challenge in Khazalid that sounded like an axe grating on stone. Queek did not understand the words, but he knew their meaning. He faced Ungrim but paled before the ferocious onslaught brought to bear. The clan leader fled, and as much as it pained him, Ungrim did not give chase, for the rest of the Skaven were approaching, and he would not abandon his army. He would go down, fighting alongside his companions, his sons and his rivals. And that one human they brought along, what was the deal with him again? As the Scaventide neared, the Slayers dug deep. Each and every one of them was here to atone for a shame long past, and each of them, with that shame burning in their forethought, charged headlong into the approaching horde. The Slayers tore into one rat man after another. Garagrim was a cyclone of gore, twin axes severing arms and legs and heads and tails with every motion. Crag swept his great axe high and low, leaving Raki with each strike and return, his motions monotonous and deadly. Gotrek, laughing maniacally, rage and delight burned in his one mad eye, sent bodies cascading, each swing of his rune axe an act of superhuman strength. And then there was Ungrim, fighting with the recklessness of a slayer ready for death, and the determination of a king, unwilling to fail his people. The Skaven kept coming, and coming, and coming, until the flood of bodies finally ceased. The Slayers, too exhausted to boast, stood bewildered at what had happened. They had survived. They weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to all be dead, in a heroic final stand that simultaneously let them die gloriously, whilst also crippling and eradicating the terrible clan Moors. Ungrim didn't have a plan going forward, so he did what he always did when he wasn't quite sure what to do. He looked for a fight. The days of dwarfs awaiting the decrepit trudge of time were over. Thorgrim was bringing order back to the Darklands. Grombrindal was punishing the beastmen for daring to attack the holds, and the northern World's Edge mountains were being tamed. Ungrim settled scores that laid heavy in the Book of Grudges for centuries, and while retaking Karak Eight Peaks did not resolve his shame, it did cheer him up ever so slightly. Not enough to smile, though. So much of dwarfen livelihood had been lost over the millennia, but now was the time to take it back. He reforged the Axe of Dargo, a feat which involved killing several hundred Northmen, which is how Slayers fix their weapons apparently. Then he reclaimed the Dragon Cloak of Fierskar, which had been pilfered by a gathering orc force. The Karaz Ankor was seeing a new age of prosperity, and that drew jealous eyes. Queek Headtaker, still bruised from their last confrontation, had mustered everybody from every burrow and Scavendom, with the plans of traversing the ruined, corrupted underways and tearing out the still-beating heart of the dwarves. Figuratively and probably quite literally too, knowing him. But this was Ungrim's domain. The halls may have been tainted and bathed in the glow of warpstone, but it was built by his people, and it would be reclaimed by his people. The halls echoed with the din of each army, and when the two forces collided, there was only chaos. A deafening clash of metal and thick, choking smoke filled the underworlds. Warpstone magic rippled, flames both natural and not cascaded, and bullets screamed from every direction. It was pandemonium. Dwarf and Skaven alike lashed out, showering friend and foe in bursts of gore and viscera. The disorientating onslaught of lights, darkness, and sound made the combatants wonder if they had already died, thoughts confirmed only when everything went black. Queek lashed out in the carnage, and Ungrim picked him out amidst the cacophony. Clearly outmatched, the Skaven warlord fled, but Ungrim was on his trail. He let him escape once, and that haunted him. He knew it was his destiny to kill the Skaven, and he would pursue him to the ends of the earth if needs be. Ungrim's shouts of fury trailed off as he saw a very long pair of legs stride past him, and his determination morphed into disbelief as he watched Felix Jaeger, the only human in the entire Karaz Ankor, overtake him, strike out, and gut Queek Headtaker in one fell swoop. In the human's defense, he was trying to prove himself to the Slayer King, and in doing so got his name penned down eternally in the Great Book of Grudges. While upset at having his quarry denied him, at least it wasn't his doom. Queek was vicious, insidious, cruel, but he wasn't to be the death of Ungrim. This was the strongest foe for 100 miles. Yet he was so weak that he was killed by a human. The World's Edge Mountains were safe. Grombrindal continued to clear the Badlands of beast and orc. Thorgrim had finally found some Chaos Dwarfs and was proceeding to kill them all. As king, Ungrim had brought peace and prosperity. He'd returned the dwarves to their place in the forefront of the world stage. He had fulfilled his oath as a king. He called all slayers back to Karak Kadrin. Their work was not done. He enlisted the aid of Malachi Macaison and invited him on an expedition no slayer could resist. They would go north, into the Chaos Wastes, into hell itself, and face every monster that dwelled therein. That's where they would find their dooms, and they would leave a road of skulls in their wake. There was a sense of bristling anticipation as the slayers marched north. They would find their destiny if they had to walk to the ends of the earth and face every vile spawn that the gods of chaos and destruction could muster. They would die gloriously, atone for their dishonor, and earn their places in Grimnir's halls. Ungrim's throng came across Grimgor Ironhide, laying siege to the Silver Pinnacle, greatest of the Urki Draj, the Black Orcs. The Urk's great axe had doom written all over it. Not literally, orcs can't spell doom. They met Grimgor across a chasm, two narrow straits separating the dwarfs and the greenskins. For once, Ungrim did not order his troops to charge recklessly to their deaths. Let them come, he bellowed. The warboss's horde drew near. Black orcs thumped towards the perilous bridges of rock. Goblin riders harassed the dwarves, while squigs and war wagons rushed forth. Giants crashed towards the front line, and the slayers were salivating, shaking, desperate to allow their bloodlust to take them. Finally, Ungrim gave the order. Fight well, and die. The slayers slammed into the orcs and drove the greenskins back. Ungrim and Garagrim fought side by side and cleared one straight. The sheer force of their charge sent the orcs routing. The underbelly of Grimgor's main force was exposed, and the Slayer King struck firm and deadly. He waded through the melee towards the Black Orc, who was proclaiming his own greatness, roaring an oath. Ungrim's axe licked out once, twice, and then the fire in the Black Orc's eyes was snuffed out as he toppled, hitting the earth with a seismic thud. The orcs were scattered, and Ungrim's throng followed the scent of death through the Darklands, pillaging Grimgor's abandoned war camps as they went. The Road of Skulls took them further north, and their path was blocked by an army loyal to Archaon the Everchosen, war host of the Apocalypse. If he's destined to destroy the world, surely he's able to give me a good thrashing, Ungrim thought. This underling of the Chaos Lord proved pitiful. There was no chance this henchman was tied into Ungrim's destiny. But the fact that he was nobody's demise, that he faced an army of dwarves desperate to die and couldn't kill a single one. Surely the ruinous powers could muster more. The trail of destruction continued. They neared the lost dwarfen hold of Karak Kadrin, which had fallen to the forces of chaos centuries ago. Arbal the Undefeated, chosen champion of Khorne, made it his seat of power in a despicable act of hubris and disrespect. Ungrim liked his prospects, the god of blood's paragon, who's physically incapable of losing. How could this not be his doom? The slayers surged towards the walls, certain their atonement lay among the hordes of blood-encrusted chaos warriors and infernal demonkin. Malachi Macaison was en route, but unfortunately got off his airship a tad too early and was running as fast as his little legs could carry him. Whether there'd be any chaos warriors left for him was another matter. The slayers bounded up the ladders and onto the walls, burying axes into crimson armor and demonic flesh. Gotrek and Felix took the walls, driving the Hellspawn back, while Ungrim pursued a more direct approach. He took his axe and drove it into the main gate over and over. He issued a challenge to the champion of Khorne, and it was answered. Arbal had bathed in a sea of blood during his conquests, offered the skulls of 10,000 dwarves to his god, and he intended to make the slayer's death slow and agonizing. The ancient gate buckled before the storm of blows, and Arbal readied himself. I'm sure he'd rehearsed some wickedly clever speech that was all very evil and threatening, but he never got the chance to deliver it, as Ungrim buried his axe in his face, and the undefeated lord dropped to the floor, limp and dead. The Slayer King rolled his eyes. No destiny for him here, it seems. No more games. He executed the prisoners and marched further north still. His gambit sent shockwaves across the world. Knowing the great Slayer King of Karak Kadrin was absent, forces of ruin assaulted the undefended Karaz Ankor. Jatan the Black, Dekala the Denied One, and Ikit Claw all salivated at the idea of carving up the great Dwarven Empire, though they would have a rude awakening, because it was not undefended in the slightest. Grombrindal and Thorgrim had been tasked with the defense of the homeland, with one instruction: don't actually defend, go and bloody attack them. And thus they did. Ungrim had tracked down Archaon the Ever-Chosen. If there was to be a match for the Slayer King, of one who could stand toe-to-toe with him, it had to be the bringer of the apocalypse. Not only was Archaon tempered in centuries of hatred, malice, and the dark desires of the Chaos Gods, his followers' only purpose was to wreak destruction upon the world. They reveled in suffering, and unholy blessings turned them into instruments of devastation. In another timeline, Archaon would prove worthy. He rode up to Ungrim as though he knew, by the powers of destiny, the Slayer could not kill him. His arrogance was his downfall. The Slayer throng, among cursed peaks and roiling molten rivers, had found themselves in a death scene they could only have dreamt of. But there was a small problem. They weren't dying. But the promised absolution just over the horizon kept driving them forward. Malachi was having second thoughts about the whole expedition, but his worries evaporated as he found himself surrounded by a mass of demons. This is more like it, he thought. All the horrible machinations and sickening designs that the blasphemous Chaos Gods could muster. As the Slayers charged towards their death, the shadows of beasts danced over them. Slayers are capable of a great many things, but they cannot fly. And so a murder of winged furies should prove disastrous. Or it would, if this wasn't the only dwarf in the Karaz Ankor that traveled by gun-laden flying fortress. Malachi's overwhelming firepower cut down the flying vanguard, and the Slayers made short work of the various mutants, monsters, and tentacled oddities on the ground. These monsters, while terrible and malignant, were mere pawns of a more baleful evil. A demon prince who wielded the might of all four gods of damnation. Yorhul, he called himself, which, when passed through a Reichspiel dictionary, then converted into Khazalid and back again, gets translated into the name Daniel. Ungrim tracked the Hellspawn to the ends of the earth, to the northernmost pinnacle of the Chaos Wastes. Fire burned in his veins as he commanded his throng to meet their destiny. For weeks he trod the road of skulls, following in the footsteps of Grimnir himself. The patron of Slayers went north to face the source of chaos never to return, and Ungrim traced the path of the ancestor god. Arbal the Undefeated, infernal rage-filled champion of the god of slaughter, could not weather the relentless strikes of the axe of Dargo. Archaon the Ever-Chosen, harbinger of the unholy pantheon, destined to usher in the apocalypse. Even the powers bestowed unto him couldn't halt the Slayer King. Was this all the ruinous powers had to offer? He stood toe-to-toe with the Demon Prince, the ultimate prize for Slayers of Legend, and it killed him to know deep down, not even this arch-fiend could expunge his shame. He watched melancholic as all those who joined him rallied at the promise of a glorious death. His friends, family, rivals, countrymen, they had suffered the same torturous fate as him. The only thing they sought in the world had eluded them. They had pledged to travel to the ends of the earth, doing battle with the forces of chaos until some grand apocalyptic evil could bring them down. But they had run out of earth, and they'd run out of chaos. All that was left were some elves, and there was no chance that they would be the death of Ungrim. Because they were elves, they were useless. So Ungrim killed the elves, hoping it would lighten his blackened mood, and granted, as he cut down Malus Darkblade, he did feel a little bit better. His doom was still out there, somewhere, maybe in a different time or a different place. But for now, Ungrim would return to his duties. He was a king, and his charge was mighty. His followers had expanded the Karaz Ankor during his expedition north, and punished ancient enemies of the Dwarfs across the world. The time-lost alliance between man and dwarf was renewed and blossoming by choice and not necessity. Ungrim returned to Karak Kadrin, disappointed, but the glimmers of hope still flickered. He may have inadvertently delayed the apocalypse by killing everyone who could have initiated it, annihilating the one destined to destroy the whole planet. But surely, there's gotta be someone stronger than him. There has to be. And that hopeful delusion is what drives Slayers, be they warriors or kings. The hopes that somewhere there's always a stronger enemy, and that their doom is just around the next corner. And there we go. That was my narrative campaign for Ungrim Ironfist. If you are hearing me now, it means you watched the whole thing. Good job, you. I'm Willis, and this channel is my way of exploring how my favourite games can be used as engines for stories. I take a campaign, squash it down, do some editing things, and use all that to tell a story. My main focus is on Warhammer 3, though I'm experimenting with Age of Wonders for my next video to see how a narrative campaign for that would look. I'll be coming out with these campaigns as regularly as I can, and I don't actually know what my next Lord will be. I'll throw up a poll and leave it running for a week or two, so if you want to help me pick, that would be really lovely. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, you've been amazing, and I will see you another day for another story.